Welcome back to Proxy, everybody. It's been a while. It's good to be back. Good to be talking about the Eldar once again. And today we are going to be talking about the top 10 Eldar units in Pariah Nexus. But before we get into that, I do want to mention that I have several videos that I'm currently working on. This is why it kind of took me a little bit longer to come out with another video than it usually does, because I'm trying to get some games in against some different factions that are, considered the top tier factions in Pariah Nexus to give you guys some insights. Armies like Blood Angels and Space Wolves and stuff like that tend to give players a hard time because of one or two units that they have that are, basically just really oppressive, like the Thunderwolf Cavalry, of course, or Death Company. So yeah, I'm really excited to get those videos out there, and I have a game in a couple of days against a Blood Angels player that, even though it's not his main faction, because of course Blood Angels are so strong right now, kind of incentivized him to kind of bring them out again and see what they're about. So that is going to be pretty fun. I'll kind of give you guys a rundown when I do that video of his list and things like that, and some tactics that we can use against those types of armies to defeat them. And before we dive right into it, I want to give you a quick forward on what I'm basing these placings on. So there's going to be two main criteria in which we focus our efforts in this video and in this ranking system. One is going to be the flat datasheet strength, right? How good is the unit in all situations and in all lists? That's the first criteria. It's a datasheet strength. The second criteria is going to be the competitive meta that we find ourselves in, which is currently tending to favor melee-oriented armies that are fast and hard-hitting. So like I said before, things like Space Wolves, Blood Angels, and, just relatively quick factions who can move around the board very fast and hit very hard. All right, so without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in to the top 10 Eldar units in Pariah Nexus. Coming in at number 10, we have Rangers. And Rangers have stolen a spot once again on the list due to the fact that, yes, there is a very heavy amount of melee armies out there that are fast and that are very hard-hitting, and you need something cheap to act as a buffer between your army, or at least the more fragile parts of it, and the enemy's forces. And Rangers are perfect for this. They have Infiltrate, so they can get up the battlefield quickly, deploy anywhere they want to screen. They have a D6 reactive move, making them excellent at screening out enemy units as well. Their stealth makes them harder to kill from incidental shooting, and what that is basically, your random pistols or bolters, etc., that you would get from combat-based units. So they're essentially harder to kill, and therefore they screen better because, if the unit is still alive after the shooting phase, then it's going to be a lot harder for your opponent to be able to then charge the units they want to charge. The reactive move also makes this increasingly difficult, as they will be able to move to position themselves better. The Ranger long rifles also aren't bad. They can pick off characters they have line of sight on, and there's a lot of squishy little characters that are embedded into bigger units that make them much more powerful. So while it doesn't have a great chance of killing those characters, it very well can. And that in and of itself is a pretty powerful thing to have in your back pocket, even if it doesn't always happen. And it is for those aforementioned reasons that Rangers earn their place at number 10. And really, I think in Pariah Nexus, if you're going to be going into competitive play, you're going to be going into tournaments, it is a very good idea to bring at least one unit of these guys with you. Okay, now for our number 9 spot, it is going to be Swooping Hawks. And of course, Swooping Hawks were going to make this list, right? Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. They did get a points increase. They're looking less attractive, of course, than previously. But within the scope of Pariah Nexus, deployment zones are closer together, which means Swooping Hawks can score easier on objectives. But it also means that Swooping Hawks can more easily transverse the battlefield to be able to screen out enemy units. So having that high base movement does allow them to screen very easily. It also allows them to score very well also. They have decent ranged firepower that can chip wounds off of bigger targets with lethal hits. And lastly, of course, their best ability is Skyleap, allowing them to score on objectives easily by moving themselves from the battlefield into reserve, and then can, of course, deep strike the next turn. And because they're able to basically go wherever they want to, They can score on objectives easily and wipe out small units attempting to do the same thing, right? So Swooping Hawks, very good at counter objectives as well, just because of the fact that they have enough firepower to wipe out those small MSU units of light infantry. Things like Mandrakes, right, that are going to be trying to score on objectives, Swooping Hawks are very good at wiping out. And just like Rangers, you're probably going to want one of these in your army if you want to play at the competitive level. Because they are so versatile, they will likely be of value in every single game you play. And having said that, coming in at number 8, we have the Falcon. And the reason why the Falcon is on this list is because so many units work so well with the Falcon. It has so much synergy with some of the strongest units in Pariah Nexus. It also has a great shooting with a bright lance and a pulse laser, so it's not like you're just paying attacks for the unit that's inside of it. It increases the damage on units disembarking when attacking the same target with rerolls to wound, which is currently pretty much the only way we can get this unit-wide. So units like Striking Scorpions and Troupes being able to reroll devastating wounds is absolutely brutal, and it's one of the reasons why the Falcon is on this list. It can also move very quickly and is a good screen in a pinch, and you're going to need both of those if you want to succeed in Pariah Nexus. And especially with the new pivot rules, Falcons are pretty much one of the best models for this change. Wave Serpents are also good, but I just don't think they compete with the Falcon. They do have a few benefits that the Falcon doesn't, but in the Wild West of Pariah Nexus, I think having a little bit more punch and being able to help the unit that's inside a little bit more than the Wave Serpent does is well worth the extra 20 points you pay. Coming in at number 7, we have the Wind Riders. And Wind Riders are a unit I've been talking about for a while, but once again, they're one of the best units in Pariah Nexus because of the strong presence of Marine equivalents in the meta. They have fantastic damage against those Marine equivalents and can hit hard into tougher targets with the right buffs. They are very fast, and when taken in big units are a huge overwatch threat, especially if you throw Guide on them. Just imagine rolling for 6s with Guide, but for every hit you get a sustained hit as well. So you're basically doubling your overwatch threat right there. They are also extremely fast and have a relatively low profile, even in a big unit, if you squish them tightly together. And by the way, guys, remember, because they are on a base and they are not vehicles, you do not measure distances from the hull. I see a lot of players measuring from the jet bike itself. You do not do this, right? For all intents and purposes within a game, you measure to and from the base. And in regards to obscuring terrain, as long as the base itself is behind the footprint of the ruin, then you're hidden, right? So if a little bit of the jet bike is sticking out over the area terrain, an opponent can't say, nope, look, your base is over there, that means I can shoot you. Absolutely not. Everything, again, is measured to and from the base. So yeah, due to the fact that they're extremely fast, easy to hide, relatively speaking, and have a lot of firepower that can decimate enemy units and, even punch up into vehicles and monsters as well, especially with Shroud Runner support, makes them one of the best units in Pariah Nexus going forward. All right, so next up at number 6, we have the Solitaire. Now, the Solitaire has always been a pretty good lone op, but the fact that the deployment zones are closer together now means that his extreme speed and the fact that you can easily make a turn 1 charge make him one of the deadliest and most potent lone operatives in the game. Being a lone operative, of course, makes it difficult to target, and the fact that it has fights first, I think, puts it over the top and definitely makes him deserve a place in this list, especially when you consider the points reduction or command point reduction of Heroic Intervention. It used to be 2 CP, now it's only 1, so you can easily justify our Heroic Intervention with a Solitaire to wipe out an enemy unit of Marines. Which, with 9 attacks at Strength 6, AP -2, and Damage 2, he is very likely to do. He's also very good at scoring secondary objectives, being very fast and, somewhat durable. Having Lone Op makes him very good at scoring secondary objectives, even the ones that you have to survive to your opponent's turn to be able to score on. But again, truly in my opinion, what sets him over the top is that fights first and Heroic Intervention interaction He's very good at doing this, and he's a great counter to a lot of melee units in the game because of it, which I think has definitely earned him a spot in the top 10. Alrighty, coming in at number 5, we have the Autarch Wayleaper. Okay, now some of you may be wondering, well, Proxy Hammer, you haven't really ever had the Autarch Wayleaper in any serious way in one of these top 10s. Why is he all of a sudden in here now? What's changed? The reason being is because, as before, the Autarch Wayleaper was just considered an auto-include, mostly for the CP generation and the fact that it was a hard character to kill, aka a lone operative that could have a Phoenix Gem. While that was good and everything, there was a lot of armies that could easily just ignore him the entire game, give you your command points, and still beat you in other areas of the game. Primarily, primary objectives, because of the fact that the Eldar just really weren't that good at primary objectives since they've gotten some nerfs. Now, however, we have these secret missions, especially command insertion, and just like that, the Autarch Wayleaper now can score a ton of primary points for you. So not only is he good in combat and has decent ranged punch, his CP generation makes it even easier for him to score on this. He has +1 leadership in an aura around him, which is useful for keeping your units in control of objectives, especially himself, because he's going to need to be for command insertion, which essentially gives him leadership akin to the Primarch. So he's not going to be failing a lot of battle shock tests, especially with Fate Dice, because remember, you can easily plug in a 4 and automatically pass, which, is something that you may not realize, but it has saved me quite a few times in my games before. And yeah, basically everything about the Autarch Wayleaper that you know and love, but now put to a purpose that can actually score you primary victory points, and that is why he has earned his place at number 5. Not to mention that the same thing I talked about with the Solitaire, heroic intervention and fights first, the Autarch Wayleaper has a lesser version of that, of course. He's not as good as in combat, of course, as the Solitaire, but he is still a decent choice if you need to save a unit from sure destruction. Okay, coming in at number 4, we have Fire Dragons. So Fire Dragons are still one of the best units in the index. Not only do they hit extremely hard against large targets and elites, basically being able to trade up against almost anything in the game that is, worthy of them shooting at, but they also have grenades, so they can deal additional mortal wounds. Also, their extra melta damage can get around damage-reducing abilities like half damage stuff, like the Incarn and the Avatar, or 0 damage negating abilities. There's a lot of things in the game that do this, things like Rogel Dorns, Magnus, as well, which means that yes, you'll be able to negate one of those D6 damages, but you're not going to be able to get past all the damage, which is big, especially since these guys have Melta 3. And basically that just means that your opponent is either going to have to make their invulnerable save or they're going to take a ton of damage. And either way, the Fire Dragons are making more than their points up by doing so, especially in a Falcon where they get to reroll wounds. And of course, in this crazy meta, we definitely need units that can hit above their weight class. That is for sure. Next up at number 3, we have the Troupe. And what more can I say about the Troupe except it's one of the most versatile melee units in the entire index, if not the entire game. Grenades and fusion pistols hit hard against Terminator equivalents and other elites, making them, of course, hit much harder than their cost would suggest at 75 points. And they hit really hard on the charge, being able to give +1 to anything it joins, any character, for example, Yvraine or the Vizarch, or even a Troupe Master, is very strong. In addition, they are very fast and have decent durability. So even against things that hit very hard with Strength 8, AP -3, stuff that is going to tear apart your vehicles in close combat, Harlequins are honestly quite fine against it, especially under the effects of lightning fast reflexes. If something is hitting you on 4s or even 5s with lightning fast reflexes, and then they have to additionally wound you and also get through a 4+ invulnerable save, chances are your Harlequins are going to be able to kill more of them than they are of you, and that means the Harlequins are going to come out on top. They do hit very hard, especially when re-rolling wounds out of a Falcon. So again, the Falcon makes another appearance because it is just that good with melee Eldar. Especially with the Troupe, because the Troupe not only has good melee, but it also has decent shooting. So it can reroll the wounds with its shooting attacks and its melee attacks, which is probably honestly one of the best combinations and, 1-2 hit combos in the entire game for its points cost. Now, again, keep in mind, when I say these things, I'm saying for the points, because Harlequins are only 75 points base, which is extremely cost effective for what they can do. So that has earned the Troupe the number 3 spot on the list. And also, if you have your Troupe Master as the Warlord, they become battle line, which is also situationally awesome if the mission rule benefits battle line units. Alrighty, coming in at number 2, we have Striking Scorpions. Now, it was a little bit difficult for me to decide which would go in the number 2 spot, Striking Scorpions or the Harlequin Troupe. I decided Striking Scorpions because they can basically be run without a transport, while the Troupe does need a transport to be effective. Being able to infiltrate allows them to screen and potentially tie up and eliminate enemy units early. Now, they're not going to do a ton of damage if they're not in a Falcon, of course, rerolling those wounds, but they're going to do enough to, either tie up a unit, like I said, screen, or kill a weaker enemy unit on turn 1. That is typically something that a Harlequin Troupe cannot do without support, without either a transport, a character, or what have you. They also hit really hard out of a Falcon in addition to this. So if you do want to kit them out for some heavy damage, they can do that, especially with Gondras, and are very cost effective for what you get. Being able to reroll those devastating wounds is absolutely insane and just shreds anything that is not a vehicle or monster. Especially with Cahandras, because Cahandras really does a lot of damage himself. He is a one-man army, essentially. And really any unit of Terminators or equivalent is going to be in big trouble if they are hit by this unit. And it is for that versatility, being both able to be a sacrificial unit in an infiltrating and screening role, and a heavy damage dealer if, put in a Falcon with the right combos and synergies. They have earned themselves the number 2 spot in Pariah Nexus. Now, before we move on to the number 1, I do want to make some honorable mentions, and those are as follows. The Yinkarn. The Yinkarn is still extremely effective with the ability to pop off on an Alpha Strike and wreck the enemy's, most valuable units in their backfield. Can really put an enemy on the back foot and prevent them from getting back into the game. The Avatar of Cain is an extremely durable unit with a high damage profile that can basically wipe anything out in close combat, and is pretty good on primary objectives as well. He's also a bit of a control piece because of his Overwatch. Not to mention the addition of Overwatch, which make him a very good control piece as well. Storm Guardians are very good at making objectives sticky, screening, and otherwise trading pretty effectively against other basic units. Howling Banshees are very good at tying up enemy units that need to be tied up because of their quick advance and charge, or very good at heroically intervening because they have fights first, which is very good at blunting an enemy charge. Howling Banshees will on average kill about 4 Space Marines if they're able to strike first, which in the case of heroic intervention, they probably will. Warwalkers are still very good. Bright Lances are still needed in some places, and Warwalkers having scout and the maneuverability needed to get certain angles in the heavy terrain-packed layouts of Pariah Nexus make them a very good choice still. Vipers are arguably even better for the cost now that they are still armed with the Bright Lance, but are cheaper at 75 points and are able to remove cover, which is very awesome as well. The Vizark is very good for giving his units fights first, especially Quins. Quins with fights first is absolutely insane. Yvrain is still very good with her anti-infantry 2+ and devastating wounds, basically able to carry the unit against some, particular types of models. That would normally be difficult for the normal Troupe to handle. And Cahandras, lastly, is just a one-man army, and I've talked about him with Striking Scorpions. He is just an absolute beast. Does a ton of damage, crits sustained hits on a 4+ when he charges in, and of course can deal devastating wounds not only to infantry, but also vehicles and monsters alike. Okay, now for the moment you have all been waiting for, what is the number 1 unit in Pariah Nexus? And what do you know, guys? It's Warp Spiders taking the spot at number 1. And of course, it had to be Warp Spiders, right? Being able to move 24 inches base and still be able to score secondaries in a mission pack that doesn't allow advance and score typically is extremely strong. But quite frankly, it's just the tip of the iceberg for the Warp Spiders. Their reliable shooting and decent overwatch threat make them a great Alpha Strike unit that can hit an enemy target hard, potentially kill it, opening up the battlefield for you, and also make your opponent worry about stepping within the 12 inches that they can overwatch from. And let me tell you from experience, Dark Eldar do not like Warp Spiders. You may be able to deny one overwatch or maybe even two overwatches with the Archons, but you're not going to be able to deny everything, especially if somebody is placing their Warp Spiders in a position that your Archons are nowhere near. They're very effective. Also, their devastating wounds and torrent gives them good chip damage into any target. So even if you are not fighting an army that you can outright kill, with the single volley of Warp Spiders, hitting them and then hitting them into an overwatch, dealing an average of 6 mortal wounds, and maybe you even spike on one of the rolls, is extremely useful against a wide variety of units in the game. Now, quite frankly, this has kind of always been the case with Warp Spiders. People love Warp Spiders. They've always run them in, units of 2 or 3 in competitive lists. But you're seeing them even more now because we desperately need the ability to move 24 and still perform actions, especially with the deployment zones being closer together. Warp Spiders are better than ever. And they're really good against melee units. Because again, the ability to jump up to something, hit them with a bunch of mortal wounds, then potentially even fire and fade, or maybe even just stay there and overwatch to cripple the enemy unit is going to be a very effective use of 125 points. And yes, they can also technically score on things like behind enemy lines while they're at it. And as a last little tidbit that the Warp Spiders have, they have the Exarch. And of course, the Exarch is armed with the Power Blades and dual Death Spinners, which basically make him a decent combat threat against very small enemy units. So think about it. Your opponent has maybe 1 or 2 Marines on your home objective left over at the end of the game. You can move up the Warp Spider Exarch, fire the 2 Death Spinners into them, and then charge in, and maybe you get the kills, especially with Fate Dice, if you really have them. So again, the Warp Spider Exarch is also a clutch model in the right circumstances. So yeah, Warp Spiders definitely take number 1. I think they're undisputedly the best Eldar unit in the entire index in Pariah Nexus at the moment. Now, of course, I don't think everybody should just go out and buy 3 units of these. That's not what I'm, kind of striving for or trying to convince people into, but they are very good. There's no doubt about it. Using 1 or even 2 Warp Spider units in your army can vastly increase your effectiveness in the first couple turns of the game, and even further on if they manage to survive. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my interpretation of the top 10 Eldar units in Pariah Nexus. Let me know what your top 10 is in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, and I'll see you guys next time. Again, like I said, I have a few more videos coming out later this week. Hopefully, I can get my Blood Angels video out within the next couple of days. I'm thinking Monday, but perhaps even Tuesday. We'll see. Hoping to get more content out for you guys soon. And once again, I would also thank my patrons and supporters for supporting me over the last 1.5 years. Plus now, it's really 1 3/4 years at this point. We're almost to 2 years. Your help has been greatly appreciated and has helped the channel improve considerably. So thank you so much for that. And if you do want to help support the channel and become a patron, I have free trials activated, which means you don't have to pay a dime to be granted access to our Discord community, which loves to talk about Eldar strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description below. And please join us. You can talk to me, a lot of other Eldar veterans in the Discord as well, if you need advice, tips, or some inspiration. I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page. So if you want to grab some discounted miniatures on Amazon or some, craft rolled Eldar inspired apparel on the channel store page, I will leave the links for those in the description as well. All right, everybody, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.